Hello, welcome back to Sextras.
Where we talk about sex and all the extras.
I'm Honey, and my fun fact is I've had sex in an elevator.
Oh, wow. I really want to do that.
I'm living your life goals.
Yeah. Hello, guys. I'm Maria, and my fun fact is that I've never had sex outside. So I guess it's not that much of a fun fact at all. It's actually kind of a sad fact, but there you go.
Should we start changing the fun facts to sad facts?
It would be way more on brand, to be fair.
Yeah, sad girls hour. We were saying how our podcast is literally sad girls hour.
Sad boys.
Yeah,
The Sad Boys Club.
Yeah. This week we have a very exciting guest with us. She is our friend from school. We've been friends for I don't even know how many years.
Yes, we've been through a lot together, right, guys?
Yeah.
Yes,
we went through our sexual awakening together.
Yes, we did.
And yeah,
I mean, not really together. We didn't fuck each other, but
I don't think that's what anybody was
thinking. That's what Maria's thinking.
She's like, I fucking wish.
Sorry, anyway, introduce yourself, please.
Hi, I'm Miranda, as you guys know. Friend from school, sexual awakening, all that jazz. My fun fact is that I did not orgasm until I was 18 and bought my first vibrator, which I'm sure resonates with most of our listeners, women listeners, I'm hoping. I can't be the only one. That is my fun fact. It's also another sad fact, the Sad Boys Club.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure so many people relate to that. We talked about it in our episode, A Girl's Gotta Come. So
I remember.
you guys can go check it out.
Yeah, definitely check it out.
So for our segment this week, as Miranda said, in light of the presidential election and Trump being a complete arsehole and misogynist, basically, we're going to talk about sexual fantasies as much as we possibly can.
Because the election is such an inspiration, isn't it? Such an inspiration.
Yeah. The elections just made me feel really sexual, you know?
That tete-a-tete between Biden and Trump is such a turn on.
So turned on by this slow counting. It's like teasing us with the result, you know? But we asked our Instagram followers, what is your sexual fantasy? And we have a few answers that we're going to discuss.
So, what are our followers' sexual fantasies? Someone said being pinned down by the throat.
That's very intense. Pinned down. But like, what do they just mean choking, or like they're literally like they can't move?
Yeah, to be fair, they did add like, this is quite vanilla, ha ha ha.
Is it? No, I don't know. I think pinned down is pretty specific.
No, I feel like it's quite 50-50.
Pinned down is specific.
Yeah.
If it was like being choked, I'd say
Yeah, I
that's
feel like...
pretty vanilla. I mean, come on, who is this?
Yeah, I guess.
No, but I would say even being choked is like very 50-50. Like either people are really into it or they're like, oh, I can't understand that. Like, ew.
Yeah, what are your thoughts? Into it or not into it?
Yeah, sounds lit. I mean, I don't want to like die, but you know.
No, that's part of the thing, honey. You get choked and you die.
That's the fantasy.
I kind of feel like it'd be hot to get pinned up. Like,
oh my god, Madge, that's a whole other ball game, I feel. A whole other ball game.
What, like on the wall?
yeah.
Torture.
Yeah, basically.
With
like,
your legs
like
just like dangling.
Yeah. I think it'd be really hot.
To all the mums and dads listening out there.
I'm so sorry, Matt.
I feel like my mum's pretty desensitized to it at this point.
Yes.
I still feel like no matter how liberal this feels and this conversation about sex feels, there is still such a daunting feeling about speaking about it, where it's going to be heard by people. I don't know what can and can't be said. Are there any limits here, guys?
Whatever you're comfortable with.
What's the second one?
To do it on an airplane.
Okay, joining the Mile High Club, not for me. I'm just not into it.
I feel like it depends on the flight. Some flights are just like horrible. I hate flying. But other flights, like, it's like, oh, I need a bit of excitement, you know, like wouldn't say no.
I don't know. I'm not against it, but like it's not in my bucket
I remember
list,
there was this one man every time I'd fly from Mexico to London, that was really attractive, and I always thought,
well, then he was always there.
Let me just clarify.
Man.
He was an air steward. No, we just coincidentally took the same flight every year.
Yeah, like he's stalking you.
It was like this guy, yeah. So this man, the air steward, there was always kind of an exchange of looks, you know, and I thought, if it were feasible, how thrilling would it be to like have sex on an airplane? But I think practically speaking, like, you'd just be too, I personally, I can't speak for everyone, I'd be too worried about people waiting to go to the bathroom.
Yeah, I feel like I'd be so self-conscious about like the air stewardesses like outside. They obviously know, like I've seen interviews with them where they're like, yeah, I mean, it's kind of obvious when people are having sex in the bathroom, like it's not exactly a big space.
Do you think it happens a lot then?
Probably.
Really?
I bet all the time, like
Kudos.
every flight.
I'm kind of more into the idea of like touching each other while sitting next to each other, like on the down low, rather than going to the bathroom. Maybe not
I
full
think you're talking
sex.
about making
Under a
people feel
blanket.
uncomfortable.
Yeah, but
I think that in itself is a
Yeah,
kink.
but so they can't see.
yeah, but to be
Okay.
fair, that's a lot of people's the Mile High Club, so I get it. But someone
True.
else said sex in an unusual location, which what
It's
counts
pretty
as
vague.
what counts as an
Person, can we
unusual
get,
location?
like a specific location?
Yeah.
Like the sink.
What do you mean by unusual?
Well,
Anonymous.
some girl had once sent a story to the podcast actually about her fucking on a cliff. Like they were like going down to the water
wow.
and they just fucked on the cliff. Like that sounds lit. Like if that's like that's an unusual location.
Okay, so with my boyfriend recently when we went to Quebec City, I don't know why this didn't come up just now when like we said this. I think it was because it felt, I wouldn't say it felt normal, but it was like it didn't crop up as like an unusual location. But like we stopped on the side of the road to like have a cigarette and a bite to eat in the forest, and we were right next to the motorway, and we had sex in the back of the trunk, like with the trunk open. That definitely, I couldn't have said before that I had sex in a really, really unusual location, but that was bizarre because like we knew that the people driving past could see just for a second what was going on. Nobody would have stopped, but it was definitely
Yeah, that's pretty
unusual.
unusual.
And,
Yeah.
How did you fit?
we basically, it's just like, you know, when you open the back of a trunk, okay, and you, as if you were gonna fill it with things like when you go to uni or when you go away, but we just use that as like a space to, does that make sense? No. That doesn't make
Yeah,
sense.
but like how did you fit inside though? I don't understand.
It was a pretty big, it was like one of those cars that when you open the trunk, it's like massive. So it was just this empty space which could have been like a bed, if you know what I mean. So I just fit myself onto the edge and yeah. So I was looking out onto the open road and he was looking towards like the empty forest, but it was it was really, I think the act of like being in such an unusual location was itself like the turn on.
Yeah.
Like apart from the
Yeah.
sex itself, it was really interesting how psychologically it was like, wow, I'm looking at an open road where people are looking at me but they won't be able to stop.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, it was pretty hot, I'm not gonna lie.
Have
Elliot,
you
if you're
ever had
listening.
sex? Have you ever had sex in an unusual location?
Yeah, I've had sex in a car, in a garden, in quite a few places.
In the lift,
In the
as he
lift,
said.
Yeah. Where else? Yeah, I've had sex in a car, but like not the trunk and not with it open. Because like in America, everyone has roommates, so it's kind of like hard, you know? So you have to like find new ways.
Oh, okay. You had sex in a car because you couldn't have
Yeah.
sex in your room. That's tragic.
But yeah, quite a few places. What about you, Madge?
Well, I've had sex in a car, but like outside a club.
Oh yeah.
I remember that story.
Other than that, like, I'm pretty sure that's the weirdest. I mean, I've had sex in like a restaurant toilet, but that's pretty much it. Like, that's the most adventurous. I've only ever had sex in beds and rooms and houses. Yeah, I'm so boring. As you heard from my fun fact, since I've never had sex
so
outside,
boring.
I'm so boring.
So boring.
Yeah, Maria, we can't be friends with you anymore because you're so boring.
But yeah, no, I do see the appeal of sex in unusual locations. I so see that as a fantasy.
Yeah. Okay, well, the next one is being tied to the bed at the wrists and the ankles.
Oh wow, that is. If you cut out the ankles, then it would be like. Less...
I mean, I feel like that is like proper BDSM.
I feel like it would be hot. I don't know. I like the idea of restraint.
Yeah, you should definitely try that if you haven't.
That's it for the submissions. Do you guys want to share any of your sexual fantasies or not really?
I think the three of us are pretty open, like, about talking about sex, but just the context really changes when you're talking to an audience and you're like, does this reveal too much about me? Should I just not? But you know what? I'm going to go for it.
Yes.
We discussed this earlier. You guys know this. But one of my sexual fantasies is to be able to fuck my boyfriend. And if that means like with a strap on, if that means like in a fantastical world, I could turning him into a woman and be a man and just like experience what it's like to penetrate my boyfriend. That would be
so fun.
Yeah.
I don't know why that is something I'd really like to experience.
I kind of get that.
100%.
Like, it's not my fantasy, but I do want to really know what it feels like to have a dick. Like, I just want to know what the sensation is. Like, how does it feel? It's like pressure around it, or like, what is it? I'm just intrigued.
We should ask the boys.
I always ask.
Yeah, I've asked so many boys, but they never really give me a satisfactory answer. I also always ask boys like what it feels like when you have to like hold in pee. And they're like, what do you mean? It's like just holding in pee, but I know it's not the same.
Guys, I told my mum that this podcast was like an intellectual conversation about like femininity and sexual liberty, and it's just turning into like, what does it feel like to have a penis?
Yeah, we're gonna get into that. We just have to like give the people what they want, you know.
I think we've done that.
I was gonna say, for me, I can never really think of any like sexual fantasies, but if people suggest it, I'll be like, yeah, I'm down. Like, I can't think of many things where I'm like, I mean, I really wouldn't want to do that, but like probably if they suggest it, I'd like think about it first and be like, like, am I into that, you know? That's the end of the segment. Let's move on to the main intellectual bit, if you will.
If you will.
So, Miranda. Obviously, we've known you for like quite a bit, but I kind of want to talk a little bit about sort of the early stages of sex and like when it kind of started being a thing at school and like that people started doing, and I guess when people started like feeling themselves as sexual people. What are your memories, and like do you remember like a positive experience, like a negative experience, sort of like break it down, if you will?
That's a loaded question, but I will try my best to answer. No, I mean in the ins and outs of what I experienced, you guys know the stories, and I won't be telling them all here because like who gives a fuck actually. But I think initially, like being a sexual being and exploring my sexuality like as a young female, it was empowering, but at the same time I think you do come into contact with a lot of people who aren't on that wavelength and who will judge you, men and women. But a lot of, I think, slut shaming, and I'm sure you guys have spoken about that in your previous podcasts. I think I've got a lot of shame from that period of my life, despite my sexual liberty, feeling like those experiences actually said like more negative things about me than positive things, where my friends were like, oh, you're so sexually liberated and you're doing all this stuff and you have so many stories to tell. I think in deep down there was a part of me that really resented myself for not actually connecting to true love or what sex could be if you felt with, I don't know, more intense feeling. And a lot of my interactions, I think, despite being like very, I think they made for good stories, and you guys know that I would come and tell you guys when they happen, but I think on a kind of intimate level they were really lacking. So if we can start with that as a point of departure, I think stories about sex often they reveal less about your true feelings about intimacy, if that makes sense. Like they're really, I think for me anyways, I can't speak for everyone, they were a bit more of a front than they were like a true expression of my intimacy, my sexual power. Because now that I own my sexual power, I know actually that feeling vulnerable feels a lot more true and a lot more liberating than having a lot of sex and telling stories about sex. So that's my point of departure.
You just touched on you weren't being your true like vulnerable self or whatever, but at the time did you notice that, or do you think that you were like just doing what you wanted to do, or like did you feel pressure? What was kind of going on at the time?
Okay, I mean it's difficult to reflect like in retrospect because it will just be tainted with what I've realized now, but I do think if I remember like Miranda from that time, which is it's kind of a bit of a precarious thought. I don't know if I really want to think about. But if I do place myself in her shoes, I think she had a very, it was obviously evolving, but I think she had a very honest grasp of what love could feel like. I think I sought out those things in things like literature, and you know, you guys knew me back then, and I'm still that way. I was a hopeless romantic in a lot of ways, and I think that I tried to disguise it with this sexual liberty, which was obviously, I don't regret being like that, but I think it didn't really do justice to that person who was just like, I really want to find something that feels raw and true, and I think it taught me more when I was in my first relationship than all of those kind of sexual experiences put together, to be honest, because I didn't like myself back then, and I think it would have been different if I had owned that sexual liberty. Like all my friends would say, it's really cool that you do those things, and inside I think I took pride in being able to tell the stories, like I said, but like deep down I think I didn't like that. I wanted something more. I think I was actually looking for something a lot more profound in all of those really superficial interactions. I don't know, it's a very layered thing, you know. It's like, I'm sure you guys can resonate with that.
Yeah, I really relate to that.
That kind of layered psychology behind intimacy and sex that like a lot of people don't see when you're young and you tell stories about it, or you share, even amongst your closest friends. Like there's this kind of front that you're trying to put up, and you try and act tough and act independent. Sexual liberty was a way of asserting myself as like this independent, liberated female in the face of like people who doubted me. I don't think females need to be defined like as independent through their sexual liberty. I think like it's definitely a part of it, but it shouldn't be the thing that drives you to. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Am I making sense? I think we're going off on tangents, but
No, it's fine. Do you think like the more that people kind of impose those expectations on you, or the more you felt expectations of like having to define yourself as a woman in a certain way, that you like played up to that and that's why it kind of like overshadowed your hopeless like romantic side, or whatever you want to call it.
What would you call it, hun? What was it?
Yeah, definitely not hopeless, just like you were very romantic.
Yeah, I think I had the capacity to, like, I knew I had the capacity to give love to somebody in a way that I hadn't yet. And to answer your question specifically, it's a bit of, I guess you could say it's a bit of a dichotomy, because, like, on the one hand, those expectations were placed on me, but they were also placed on me because I wanted to project them. Like, I projected those things. So, like, obviously, expectations don't get set up by nothing. I think I set up those expectations and then people followed, which is natural. And then once they were set up, I felt like the pressure to adhere to those standards all the time. But not because of them specifically. I think it was more a standard I held to myself, that if I did show vulnerability and I did show maybe like less sexual openness, that I'd suddenly be considered less of a femme fatale or sort of independent female. But I think that relates less to the people that were surrounding me, if not just my relationship to myself, which
yeah, I feel like it's definitely like a cyclical thing.
Yeah,
like you were saying, it's kind of like you put that energy out there, but it's also that comes from society and societal expectations, but then you kind of internalize that, and then that's what you project, and then people just kind of see it as that's how you are, and then it's this whole cycle.
I think a lot of women will resonate with that relationship to the self and with others. I don't know why. I mean, I can only speak from my experience and also like knowing you guys, but I do think that it is something that a lot of like women, especially those who are like sexually active or who do tap into that sexual liberty, have felt that they kind of are placed into an extremity, or they're placed like they're kind of fetishized.
Yeah, I think women especially kind of really internalize the things that they hear from society, just because it's not like we're raised in the same way as men, where it's like, oh, whatever you do is like perfect, you know, you can achieve whatever you want to achieve. Like, obviously we are told that if we're raised by like liberal parents or whatever, like you can achieve whatever you want. But there is some point in growing up as women where you kind of start to realize like, oh, maybe I can't just do whatever I want because of these like societal limits that are placed on us.
No, I do think also that at school, like if we're speaking like about specific instances, like I know that the three of us kind of shared that, and a couple of others too, you know who you are, guys. I think they shared that maybe judgment from other people, that we were just getting up to a lot of, I don't know, or that we were kind of judged for being so open about our sexuality, because we were. I mean, like, we wouldn't have shame in talking about it.
Yeah.
But I think we'd bump into a lot of kind of walls with social taboos, or like, I don't know, I definitely remember that we were considered like the weird ones because we were very open about our sex life and our sexuality, and I think that's beautiful. I just don't think it's all that accepted for women, especially young females, to be like that. Like, you are a slut if you do that, but if you're not, you... Yeah. It's a very kind of like normative debate, I suppose, but if you are open about your sexuality, then you're considered like a bit much, intense, sort of like easy, and if you're not, then you women are just placed in this binary, I think, especially at a young age, maybe less when they get older, but still.
Yeah, but I think if you're gonna do it, you kind of have to be open about it, because like if other people are talking about it, you might as well talk about it yourself and at least kind of define your own
I see what
reality.
you mean.
That's such a cheesy way of phrasing that, but you know what I mean. So how do you think then, like, coming out of that environment where everyone kind of already has predetermined like ideas of what you are and kind of how you act, how then have you managed to define for yourself like what kind of sexuality or sex and romantic life that you want to have? Like, how has that journey looked?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is like when I came to Montreal, I think it was my way out of that caged reality that I had imposed on myself as well as other people. Like that really was, I think a lot of people out here were surprised when I tell them that, because London is obviously seen as like such a liberal capital, and all I could say was that in my experience, my years, especially my last years in London, had really just aided in that like caging of my identity. That again, it was like a two-sided thing. It was both me and the people around me. But in leaving, I think I realized that I could just reset and actually begin to get to know myself on a really like raw basis. And I think it helped me realize that whether I am sexually open one day and the next, or in, let's put it in a much larger time frame, that it doesn't, that shouldn't define me. My sexual liberty shouldn't define us as women. And I ended up kind of having that conversation with Elliot, with my boyfriend, and telling him like, one thing I hope that you don't do in sort of getting to know me and in like embarking on this journey, if you will, just following the cheesy comments from Honey. I said, please don't fit me into like an ideal, a sexual ideal. Like I can't control the way you're gonna see me, but if you can do something, don't fit me into this kind of sexual fantasy, because I think ultimately, like, he had told me that he hadn't had sex like that before, and we kind of experimented with a lot of different locations, a lot of different, I guess, like scenarios, and as much as I enjoyed it in the beginning, I was just worried that I was constructing that image of myself again that I had tried so hard to kind of separate myself from when I left to Montreal. So if that answers your question, I'm not sure. It's very easy to go on tangents with these things because you're like speaking about society and yourself as well.
Yeah, no. But I feel like that kind of feeds into what we were talking about earlier. Like when you get into a relationship with someone, or when you're getting to know someone, I feel like not just men, but just in terms of relationships overall, people are so scared of like being vulnerable and scared of people getting too attached. So you kind of put those limits on yourself of like, you don't want to see him too pushy, or see him like you're too into it, and you don't want to see him like you're really jealous, even if that's how you are inside. So you kind of like push it all away until you're like past the honeymoon phase or whatever, and then it kind of, or you kind of gradually introduce these like more complex sides of your personality into it.
I have a question for you guys. Did you guys feel like in the beginning of your relationship that you use sex as a way to kind of almost disguise yourself, or just like, it's almost like a deviation point, like let me deviate, like this is how you're going to get to know me for now, until I decide that I actually want to look you in the eyes, and I want you to see who I am, like, so to speak. I mean, like, that would be tragic, you just couldn't look them in the eyes. But
don't look at me.
Put a bin bag over your head.
the shame.
I was actually just thinking about that, because I was like, I feel like I feel like I still use sex as sort of like when things are a bit scary, you just kind of like push that, you know, so you don't have to deal with it. And I was literally thinking how like the reason me and my boyfriend are together was because he wouldn't have sex with me for like months, and we got to know each other before we ever even had sex. So I don't know, I feel like it would never have happened if that didn't happen, because I would have just used sex as like which was what I was doing. I would just have sex with people and not get close with them and all of that shit.
And why do you think that women use that as a kind of disguise, or us, but I guess we could represent like a microcosm?
I think people in general use it because people don't want to get hurt, first of all. Second of all, I feel like women use it more as in like use it, quote unquote, as in they manipulate people more with sex in a way. Like, I don't want to say that women are like manipulating people, because it's like kind of a sad thing in a way, as women as the victim rather than like other people being the victim. But I do feel like women are taught, or like in some way, like it's in their head that sex is a really good tool to use to get people to do what you want, and like not to get people to do what you want, but as in like put sex in front of someone's face and then they can forget about all the other stuff, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. I feel like it comes back again to the whole like societal thing, and that women are literally made to seem like, oh, so your purpose is sex, your purpose is reproduction. And it's very easy to either fall into the mindset of like, oh, I am very much a sexual object, or like I am very much the victim, or as a lot of women realize at some point in their life, you kind of see, oh, sex gives me all this power, like I can use this power to my advantage. And I feel like that's why so much of our identity is shaped around sex, because that's like one of the main things that you can claim agency through. You're like, oh, I can be a slut, or I can like tease this guy with sex, and like, oh, and then I'll take it away, and like, look at me, I'm completely independent. And like it becomes so ingrained in us, that way of thinking.
Obviously there's always this concept of like the virgin and the Madonna, and how there's always just these like categories that you can fall into. You can either be a prude or you can be a slut, and like that is the only like things that women can be, you know what I mean? And I just feel like it's really really reductive and and really like naive. I think it's also interesting, this whole conversation about how people put this pressure on us and these labels on us, but we're also like part of that, like we're letting them do that. And recently I've just really been thinking about like my role in all the like not very nice sexual things that have happened to me. Not that I'm like trying to blame myself or anything, but like I'm trying to like dissect in my mind, like, okay, how did I let this happen, and like why did I let this happen? Like one in my head like made me think that was okay.
But also maybe there's too much like emphasis placed on our responsibility, you know. Maybe I think like something I've been talking about with my best friend Thierry, who is a male. We were talking about like how feminism, like normative feminism, has become very much a female problem, like a problem about females, when actually like I understand, I fully resonated with what you just said about assessing your role in those past interactions where you feel almost guilty, but at the same time, like how much is it our responsibility, because we are just perpetuating the ideologies that haven't changed before us and that haven't changed like during our lifetime.
Well, yeah,
do you know what I mean? It's like maybe
no, 100%. I agree. I don't mean like it's like our fault as well, but I just mean check the ways in which you are like discriminating against yourself,
right? Okay.
Yeah. Like check the ways in which you've like really absorbed what we are like what's ingrained in our minds about women, and how they're not like these sexual beings, or like if they are, then they're a slut, and like, you know, playing up to these things. I feel like we play up to them too, and it's like it's scary, but there's a lot of power in knowing that you're doing it. Do you know what I mean? So then you can change it.
I think that's exactly what I was referring to.
Yeah, I feel like it's very easy to kind of, as we've been saying this whole time, use sex as kind of an excuse, and as a very in your face explicit thing, like, look, I am being subversive, or I am rebelling against all of these categories that are being placed on me. But actually, if you look deeply into it, you kind of start to see the ways in which you subconsciously are kind of just recreating these patterns of oppressing yourself and like putting yourself in bad situations. And yeah, as Maria was saying, it's really important to examine how you personally do that, and then also everyone look out into wider society and how those things are upheld more outwardly.
I think that links like quite a lot to what I was trying to say before, maybe like without knowing how, but now that we're speaking about like perpetuating that, or it's self-jeopardizing, I guess you could call it. Like that's why I look back at that version of myself and I do feel shame, maybe because I oppress myself in my own ideologies towards women. Like I judge myself as a woman towards myself as a woman, if that makes sense. That's why I think instead of looking back at it like, oh, it was a period of sexual liberty, on the contrary, I think it might have only placed myself more into that like binary that we as women have been placed in, and I did that to myself as much as other people did. So like in reassessing my how can I phrase this, in reassessing my kind of need to define my femininity, I realized that actually that period of my life, it obviously helped me get to where I am now, but I think it was like one step forward, two steps back, and not actually allowing myself to fully own that space. Actually, when I did engage in that way sexually with men, that I judged myself as much as other people would judge me, that I should have just been like, you know, this is an expression of not my femininity, not my gender, but just my humanness. Like, yeah. I'm absorbing all of these experiences, but that's not how I looked at it at the time. I think that's how I look at it now after a lot of careful observation.
Yeah. So how have you kind of been able to move past, I mean, I don't know if you have, but we did talk briefly about this in terms of how have you... I think
this will tie into a lot of the like topics that we wanted to cover, so great. My answer to that is, so I think Elliot right now is like somebody who I see, this might be a little bit like, I guess, strange for a lot of people to hear, but like I see him less and less as a man. And I think before, all the interactions I placed myself in were with men and older men, so their role as men was very defined. And the more I get to know Elliot, the more I realize that he's less of a man, or like he embodies kind of a balance, so much of a balanced energy that I don't feel like I need to like really fulfill that role as a female, if that makes sense. But I don't think that's so much it's both like having found him and knowing that he has that balanced energy, but also allowing myself to realize that like I don't have to also prescribe a role to men, that I can allow the men that I meet in my life, because I'm attracting them, to realize that I deserve that, and that they don't have to necessarily be part of that whole, I guess, pattern and trend of men like placing women in a binary, that actually I can allow myself to see them less like men and more as human beings that will allow me to learn about love. And I don't know, I think a whole process was like getting really hurt in my last relationship, which you guys know about.
Yeah.
But also because that person was twice my age, so his distinct traits embodied what it was, I think, to be a man that could place me in a kind of identity cage, because he was older, because he also carried a lot of like conventional values. And I think part of me, maybe it's not what I wanted or consciously wanted at the time, but it's definitely something that I needed to learn in order to realize what it is that I actually deserved. That we choose the people that we love, and we can choose to love either men or women who have energies that are less gendered and more balanced, and that allow ourselves to see sex less as a I'm a female, you're a male, or vice versa, or with the same sex, and just enjoy it for what it is, which is just sharing your body with another human being.
Yeah. And I think it kind of like encourages you, like both parties feel less pressure. Because I think all the time about men and their position in, obviously the patriarchy is named after men, but how we as women place these expectations on men and how they have to live up to that. Because like I really worry about that, and I notice it a lot because my boyfriend's very like emotional. I'm sure he won't mind me saying like he is very in touch with his emotions, and I'm not as in touch with my emotions. So sometimes I kind of am like, what are you doing? Like, why?
Do you think there's a bit of a role reversal?
Yeah, it's really weird. And I think like I have kind of always thought, oh, I'm the guy, like I don't catch feelings. And that has also like using gender binaries to kind of define your sexual role and your emotional role is like so harmful. And being able to surpass that, you kind of feel way more freed from any expectations you think they have of you, or you know you have of them, and they know that you have of them. And it's just way easier to you kind of don't define yourself based on the other person as much. You're kind of just more living in harmony, if that makes sense.
did you think that you yourself, like, because we always said, like, this goes off of what, like, we were saying before about the way that I was seen back in high school, but that we'd always say you're like a grey sea, you're like emotionless, and that your mum would say that.
Yeah.
Do you think that you then began to label yourself with that kind of inability to feel, as opposed to like the reality of it being that you could feel intensely?
I guess I kind of felt like a lot of pressure to like surpass that, and I still do, but I think having the label and then being able to work off that label is helpful, and I think that's helpful for any label. Like, maybe sometimes it's better to just name the problem and then be able to do what you will with that label and go off of that. I still definitely struggle with that, but I don't think it's because of how I've been labeled. It's more just like being able to move away from it. But I feel like that's kind of the same with any label, like gender, sexuality, monogamy, like there's all of those kinds of things that are also ingrained in us.
Do you think that they're necessary?
I don't think I think labels can definitely be a lot more harmful than helpful, but it's then like labels aren't about to just disappear. So then how do we deal with those labels? Because that is what our minds as human beings, that's how we organize things in our mind, you know, with labels. Like, we need to be able to put words to things because that's how we communicate around them and that's how we create these conversations. But then how do we not just get stuck on the label? Like, how do we use the label for good? It's kind of the same with like a diagnosis. Like, what, you're just going to get given a diagnosis and be like, okay, that's it. Like, no, you're not. How do I then fix this diagnosis? It's not so much about fixing, but like, how can you live with it, and how can you like manipulate it in terms of like, how can you move past it, how can you conform to it when you kind of feel like that's necessary.
Do you think it's possible to begin a relationship with somebody and not place any, like, you know, where your feelings lie, but I'm speaking specifically because like I'm now assessing my own like situation where I realize I've used the word boyfriend in this podcast, and every time I have, I've just shuddered a bit. I've been like, oh, did I just say that? Because I love Elliot, but I don't feel like affiliated with the term boyfriend, and I feel like I actually fucking hate that word, and I don't know why I've used it. I think it's the best way to actually, like, in speaking about labels, just like define for you guys, but you already know, but like for the audience also, for there to be no ambiguity, like I am in a relationship, just so everybody knows. But I do feel like there is, I don't know, I kind of might have idealized that interaction initially, where I kind of said to him, like, I don't like the term boyfriend, and I just, there's a lack of kind of words that you can use when you're in love to really hold that space for somebody, because you say lover, and of course it sounds very romantic, but like, I think when you're talking to your family, your friends,
they're like, whoa.
Yeah, they're like, lover, I mean, you sound kind of very bohemian, and what are you, in some sort of like open relationship? And I don't know, I think there's something that we do need to, in labeling, that means that we're capturing what the reality of something, we're kind of like solidifying what it is. And I think we initially, I tried anyways to kind of just start off the relationship in a very open way, and then the more I spend time with him, the more I realize that I need that label, and it's manifesting here, right? Because I keep using the word boyfriend when actually I don't like the term, but just because I need to, it's the best way that I can display, or like, I guess, like, signal that this person is meaningful, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's difficult as well, especially as more and more people realize that monogamy is maybe not the way forward, and people are kind of more accepting of that now, to find labels that or like terms that you can use to describe people. I hate the term partner because it's only ever used in relation to gay people, and it just, I'm like, why? Like, why does it have to be that?
The thing is, in the same way that like people don't like boyfriend, I just don't think that any of them are necessary, but like whichever one works for you, I think is fine. Like, I have no problem with saying boyfriend.
Yeah.
I think it's just like, as you said, something that to you is descriptive of that person. And if boyfriend to you isn't that word, then I just don't think there's any, like, it sucks that there's not another one and that other people won't understand, like, your word. But it's just a word.
Yeah.
It's just a way of signaling to other people what it is. Like, it doesn't have to mean anything to you.
Yeah. It's just like it's the language games. It's just because people understand boyfriend and they won't understand anything else.
No, but I wish there was like an equivalent of the word queer in the LGBTQ plus community in terms of like relationships, because I feel like queer is very open, you know what I mean? It's like, yeah, I don't have to like label it. So like a relationship, you can just be like, oh, it's like
a thing.
I don't know what it would be.
But a thing.
Yeah, a thing.
I don't know.
Yeah,
For me, like,
so
maybe I have to come to terms with my own fears about what that means. But like boyfriend to me just sounds very, I think like it doesn't do justice really to what, again, like you guys will share what your views are on that, but it doesn't for me do justice to what I feel towards that person. It feels almost like it captures in a very descriptive, categorizing sense what that person is, but I think one of my biggest fears is being misunderstood, so it doesn't really do justice to what I feel towards that person. It feels like very banal. It feels almost infantile, like this person's a boy who is my friend, but like he's my boyfriend, and you know we have this relationship. No, I feel like it doesn't do justice to the whole idea that a relationship is a constant learning and a revoking of yourself, a praising of yourself. Then when you kind of come to terms with that, it's like a whole flux and stasis and movement inside of you and movement with the other person. It's like dynamic, and boyfriend just feels very, it's a stage in my life that I'm sharing with somebody. Like it doesn't, maybe I'm just hopelessly romantic that way, but I think Elliot could agree with me.
No, but I think it is kind of like the same as being fixed in a sexual role or any other role. Like once you've put that label, you can't take it away. It's kind of like, okay, well, those are the expectations that are on you now. Every set of expectations that comes with that label, there you go, that's yours, and you're responsible for it. And like now we have some contract between us that we have to uphold, but maybe it would just be so much easier for everyone if we could be way more flexible in our labeling and in our relationships, and like growing with the person, and your relationship is constantly changing. I think that would put a lot less pressure on things.
Yeah. At the same time though, I feel like people give too much power. Like, sorry, I don't want to like trash on what your opinions of the word boyfriend, Miranda, but like I feel like people really put a lot of power on the word when they're really just scared of commitment, and that's just what they just don't want to say that.
Oh no, fully, I fully agree with you.
Because to me, the word, like, of course, I really don't, like, I don't care if you use it or not. Like, I really couldn't care less. But to me, like, it just doesn't mean that much. It's just a word. How anything is a word to describe we use words to describe everything.
I understand the fear of commitment thing. I do, because I think I can actually, like, fully relate to that. But I know that I'm not a relationship type, okay? No matter how, I think there is a huge, I mean, disagreement with me, please, if you want, if you can. I really think there's a huge distinction between being hopelessly romantic and functioning within a relationship. I am the former. I am not the latter. I don't know. I think I know how to give love, and I think I try my best to do it unconditionally if I can, even though it's very difficult sometimes. But I think that is something that I know that I have. But I think that more that it kind of resides in the former, like, hopeless romantic love subject kind of interaction. Then the actual practicality of a relationship, of course I'm good at giving my time, that is the practicality of love. But in like actually being in a relationship and what that entails, I think I really shy away from labels. And whether that is something that you guys would probably agree is maybe my fear of commitment, but I think I'm actually, like, in general, I'm somebody who who acts out of courage. I'm like, okay, so this has just happened. When I met Elliot, I think I wasn't at all ready to get into a relationship, right? Like, at all. It came out of absolutely nowhere, but I did it anyways, and I tried not to be scared, even though I really was.
Yeah.
And maybe in the beginning, I was shying away from labels, from the word boyfriend and girlfriend. I remember when in the beginning he'd call his family and he'd say ma copine, like he'd say my girlfriend, and I was like, well, we haven't talked about this yet, and I'd be like in another room just like, did he really just say that? Like I wasn't aware. But I don't know. The more I realized I wanted to be with him, the more I maybe like grew, not, I wouldn't say fond, but like I started to accept those labels. But it doesn't mean they still feel right to me. It's not, I don't think that's a fear of commitment. Maybe it's just like why does it sound so fucking banal? Why does it just sound like...
Yeah, no, every time I hear the word or like use the word boyfriend, I'm like, ew, like it just sounds wrong.
Yeah.
I just don't like it.
Okay, wait, sorry, I kind of want to revise what I said, because I feel like by fear of commitment, what I actually mean is more like, it's not so much that you have to be like afraid of commitment, but I feel like it's more afraid of like what it means 100%. To be a girlfriend and like fulfilling all those roles, which like to me that's the problem. It's like those roles shouldn't exist, and this like expectation of a boyfriend or a girlfriend shouldn't exist, because it's a concept. Like people can't like fit into molds of things that humans have made up as like the ideal. Everyone's different, and I feel like I get your sentiment of not wanting to say like, oh, this is my boyfriend, because in reality this is just your partner. This is like who you're like going through life with right now. I don't know. And I feel like that's why people shy away from labels sometimes, because it's more like, I don't want this person to then become what I think in my head a boyfriend is. I just want this person to be themselves and for us to be together, and that's that. And I feel like that, to me, that's what my relationship is. And I think it's a lot more about the contract between the two people. Like, what am I expecting from you and what are you expecting from me, rather than what should a girlfriend do and what should a boyfriend do.
Yeah, I mean, I was just like, as soon as you said that much about the not wanting to be seen or not wanting to embody the concept of girlfriend, rather than not liking the label like boyfriend, I think that is very much something that resonates with me. And I've been having like conversations with Elliot about it, and I literally, a little light went up in my head and I was like, this is so relevant for me right now. I don't know about you guys, but in the beginning stages of the relationship where you kind of navigate those roles, right? And I have a little anecdote if you want to hear it that is like specific to this.
Yeah.
And it will make you guys laugh, because I had a dream the same night that kind of like exacerbated all those fears that I had, and I woke up the next morning like, oh my god, I don't want to be this person. But basically on Sunday night, so Ellie invited a couple of his friends to play poker, and I was just there, like, in his hoodie, just taking it easy. Like, it was just a night that we'd spent all day working at home, and he invited them to come around at, like, 8:30. So they arrive, and I know them quite well, but I think the one thing I've always felt, and they're very kind of Mick French guys, is that they have these kind of, and it's not a judgment to them, it's just maybe the way that they've grown up, these kind of ideas about women that are very much, like, binary. So I'm man, woman, and you can feel those interactions. I wouldn't say that they're all sexist. Like, they're not sexist people, they're not bad people, but it's just the culture within which they've grown up has kind of taught them to see women as different, very different. And I felt that immediately that they came in, and I think they're now not seeing me that way because of what happened, which I will share briefly because we have to wrap up, I know. But so I really didn't like the fact that I'll never be seen as just like a friend of theirs, as opposed to Elliot's girlfriend. Hi, Elliot's girlfriend. How's the relationship going? So like they don't even ask me those questions, but it's more maybe a fear of mine. So we sit down, start to play poker, and each one of them loses. Okay, so they keep losing, and it's just me and Theo at the end, and he's got all the chips, and I ended up winning after like a tete-a-tete, like 2 hours, where me and Theo were just like smoking joints and like drinking beers and just wanted to get the game over and done with, but we're both really stubborn, so we both wanted to win, and I ended up winning. And I think it changed kind of the way that they saw the female in that interaction, where it was like, oh, she won the poker game against 4 guys. And it might sound very conventional. I don't think that a woman has to assert herself through winning games against men, but I think in that moment I realized that even having beat them at a game of poker, that I was still worried more than the way they treated me. I was still worried I was trying to prove myself, basically. Obviously I won the game by chance, right? But I think subconsciously through all of that, when I won, it was like, okay, so now I've asserted that I'm like you guys, but it's only because I have a fear of being the girlfriend stereotype. And that same night I went to bed and I dreamt that me and the whole of our class from Herodian was on a plane to Mexico, and they saw me with Elliot, and they were all making fun of me for being like the girlfriend. And I woke up
Oh
the
my
next
god.
morning. It was crazy, and it's relevant to you guys as well, that I was like, okay, so this is a real fear and I need to just get over it, but there's something about being a girlfriend that does not chime well with me.
Yeah.
And I need to just...
I so
Does
agree.
that make sense?
Yeah.
With anyone, I hope anyone's out there like...
I love being a girlfriend. I love it.
No, at the start of my relationship, I was like, everyone in Santa Cruz will know this, because literally even people I wasn't even that good friends with would make fun of me, because I'm like, no, he's not my boyfriend. And
Yeah.
they'd be like, oh, where have you been? And I'm like, oh, I was just with him. And they're like, oh, so how's your boyfriend? Like, how is it? And I'm like, no, no, I am not his girlfriend. He is not my boyfriend. Let's just get that straight. But like, obviously you kind of have to accept it, but it is kind of like having, like, you don't want to fill a role, because I literally was like, no, I'm not, like, I feel like I'm still pushing against that, and it's kind of an endless like uphill battle. Like, you're kind of always just like trying to push against fulfilling all those roles, because I'm like, no, I'm not going to tell you to do that, like, but then you kind of slip into certain things at certain points, and you're like, oh fuck, like, why am I doing this to myself?
Yeah.
I feel like that's quite interesting, because I don't like never catch myself thinking those things, because I just feel like I'm quite happy to be a girlfriend and I don't really care. But I feel like I try to push like my boyfriend to fill the boyfriend role, like things that I'm like, no, but he's my boyfriend, so he has to do this, when it's like, but no, he doesn't. I mean, I don't do it like in an extreme way or anything. Just, like, things
Gonna
I
say
feel
like,
wow.
wow.
I'm not like, oh my god, no, he's my boyfriend, so like, he has to take me to dinner and blah blah blah. It's more of a like, I feel like I'm like, he's my boyfriend, so he should be texting me all day. Like, I'm just like, in my head that just makes complete sense, when like that doesn't really make sense.
You don't sound fucking whack to most people, don't worry.
Yeah, but I feel like my boyfriend has that too, where he's like, he feels like he has to live up to a role, because he's like, oh, but don't you want me to do this? I'm like, no, I don't expect you to do anything. I don't expect you to like do this or that. And he's like, yeah, but why? You should. I'm like, why though? Like, I don't care. I just want you to respect me and love me and just be yourself. Like, that's it. I don't expect you to make all the money and like pay for everything and buy me presents. I literally couldn't care less. I just want to spend time with you as you.
Yeah. I think this like conversation has so many different dimensions. There's a whole like psychological dimension. It's like, why are me and Hun like that? Why do we resist the role of the girlfriend? I think we both know why.
Because like,
yeah,
neither of us grew up with completely present dads, so I feel like we don't want to fulfill one role. We haven't like had examples of like binary roles, so
balance
maybe we're
out.
more like,
we balance out.
like you could kind of do both at once. I mean, not to say, Maria, like you're fucking binary piece of shit because you have 2 parents. Okay, well, I was going to say, does anyone have anything they've seen on the internet this week? But like all I've seen on the internet this week is stuff about the election. So we don't need to talk about that anymore, because like in case people forgot, we're in the middle of an election. Like I don't know if you remember, but you know, it's not
Guys,
really
let's just
anywhere.
remind you, Biden versus Trump this week. Catch it on Sky News.
Oh my god, hopefully by the time we release this episode we will fucking know who the president is. I mean, it's quite clear at this point who
Okay,
it is,
let's
but,
just
you know,
briefly speak then.
fingers
Projections. Projections,
wood.
manifestations.
Biden's gonna win.
Yeah.
Touch on wood. I don't want to jinx it.
Yeah, we can't jinx it, like fucking touch wood, but you know, fingers crossed.
Yeah,
the
we've
people
already blessed
listening.
it with this beautiful podcast. I think that is enough
Exactly.
for Biden to win the US election. Done.
Hey guys, this is Maria, editing Maria in the future / present, I guess. And I just wanted to give a little note here that obviously we didn't know that Biden was gonna win, and now obviously Biden-Harris 2020. Yeah, we're really happy, obviously, and we will talk a lot more about it next week. But for now, yay! We're really happy. But yeah, bye. Thanks so much for coming on and blessing us all with your life lessons and things, your thoughts, you know?
Such a pleasure. I couldn't stress enough how much of a pleasure it is not to just like catch up with you guys. We've done that, but like on a platform that I've never engaged with before. I mean, like spoken on before. Also, it's a conversation that departed a lot from what we spoke about and ended up like kind of finding itself in new conclusions, which I thought was really, really nice. And I miss you both.
Yes. Yeah, we miss you too. Thank you so much for joining. And thank you everyone for listening. You can follow us on Instagram at Sextras Podcast, on Facebook at Sextras Podcast. You can email us at sextraspodcast@gmail.com. Our website is going to be published in the next week. I just have to like actually get shit done. And
the amazing website Honey has built us. Are you guys so excited?
Oh
it's
my
so
god,
beautiful.
Yeah, thank you for listening. Please subscribe, review, share, tell your friends about it. You know, like it helps us so much. Please leave us a review if this is like the second or third time you're listening. Send us your suggestions.
Boyfriends who are listening, I hope you learned something about us. Elliot, I love you.
And we'll see you next Tuesday.
Bye.
You've been listening to Sextras, presented by Honey Jane Wyatt and Maria Jose Hayodatiyi. Produced by Mabel Productions.